Yeah.
The best thing I could do was to make sure that I had the right team at home.
Yes.
So I did an exhaustive study. I interviewed probably over 20 executives. I went on the internet, learned a bunch of stuff, whatever. I had such a deep understanding of like the universe of nannies and like all the different shapes and sizes they come in.
Yeah.
And then I developed my list of criteria. The most important criterion that I decided on was that they treat my child like their own child.
Right.
That was the most important thing. And then that wasn't written anywhere. That was just something that I'd figured out from just talking to lots of people and understanding what a great person was. And I did end up hiring an A player. And when you hire an A player, and I define an A player as someone who continuously astonishes you to the upside. It's a high bar for me.
Yeah.
When you hire an A player, whether it's an A player nanny at home or it's a CFO or really any position, that is when you take off.
Right.
Like that's when things go absolutely amazing for your business. That's when you can work 10 hours less a week and get more done. Hello, welcome to the Best Half Show. I'm Mark Organ, joined by my co-host Roman Bodnarchuk. This show is all about what I think is the biggest idea today in business and in our personal life, which is that your second half of your life will be 10 times better than your first. We present ideas that are contrarian, first principles thinking, all about how to make your life healthier, wealthier, and more wise. And today we are talking about how to use humans and AI in order to maximize your productivity and have a better life. There's no question that AI is dramatically changing the way that we do business. It's changing the way that we do things personally. I think we're probably still in the first or second inning, of that. But the question is like, can you use it for everything? Do the people that we hire now, are they, or that we delegate to, are they different because of AI? I mean, I know you have a lot of thoughts about it, and I've hired over 1,000 people in my career, so I'm really excited to talk about hiring and delegation. And now with AI, I think there's a really interesting spin on it.
I'm super excited about today's topic because I think that this AI technology is about as important as electricity. I really, truly believe that. And we're really early days. And I know that a lot of people have played with ChatGPT. They've asked me things like, oh, I don't know, it seems like I could do this myself on Google. But I also remember the internet when I first got it with my 56 K modem, and the only thing I could do was go into the library and see what books were there. Like it was very limited. But what's happening with AI, it's the effects, it's moving so fast, like so much faster than the internet technology by quantum leap that I think people can't even comprehend what we're going to see a year from now. So the people that are engaging in it today are going to be superhuman. And the people that are not engaging in it are going to be left behind.
Right. Yeah. And my perspective on it is I do think AI is just another tech. Now, that doesn't mean it's not profound, because it is. I mean, just electricity was profound, and the World Wide Web, which I distinguish from the internet, was very profound in its time. That said, I think we can look at history, we could see other innovations and how people adopted it, because I personally think the kind of people that do well with this new tech are not that different from the kind of people that did well with the technology that came before. That said, there is some things that are special about it. I think it really helps to explain to our audience what this technology is really good at, what it's not potentially good at, what it may never be good at, and then how do we use people and the technology in the right way to get things done, right? Because from what I've seen is old tech almost never goes away. So like last year, for example, we hit an all-time high, record high in radio advertising. Like, does anyone listen to the radio anymore?
Interesting.
They did. The telegraph did not disappear until it's like 15 years ago or something, 10, 12, 15 years ago.
Or the fax machine is still around.
Still there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's still
You're
there.
right. Yeah,
So
the old tech doesn't go away.
Yeah, and in fact, it never goes away. Like even then, like there's things that are now essentially like a more modern fax machine, like the way internet is used. So I use an example a lot from the military, right? So the original military units, which are the infantry, the cavalry, and the artillery, are still there. Okay, the cavalry don't use horse anymore. They've replaced by tanks and armored personnel carriers, but like the infantry is still there. So even in this age where we've got AI-powered robot drones that can like automatically fire on people, we still have these old units that are still there. and like the generals that succeed are the ones that figure out like how are they all used together in the right way. And so that's why I think this episode is so important, because we're starting to dive into this a little bit. We don't know the answer.
No,
we're playing with it.
We're all figuring it out.
Yeah, we're playing with it in our personal life and in our business life. We are starting to experiment and we're learning, because I believe that the people that figure out how to use it properly, because humans are not going away. Okay, we still need them for some things.
Yeah.
How do we need them? Where are they most useful and successful? And like, what's the shape of the AI tech, so that we know what kind of people we need and the kinds of roles that we need them in? Because again, if you figure that out, I think you win the game.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this topic is most of my successful friends came from the technology business. Like, they, really successful, but they're the most skeptical today. So I'll tell you how I first heard about, OpenAI and ChatGPT. I took a month off. I was in Tulum. I was working on a book, and my friend Dan Bauer joined me. So we're sitting on the beach, and I'm like, Dan, have you heard about this OpenAI ChatGPT? He goes, no, what is it? And I said, look, they just hit 10 million downloads. And so I'm explaining to him, and he's like very skeptical. He goes, Roman, did you ever think those AI guys are smart enough to make a system that would get all those people to sign up themselves? I'm like, I think Dan, you're just being skeptical. So what's interesting about this topic is my friends that were most successful in tech or made their money in tech are the most skeptical about ChatGPT. But I've been an evangelist ever since. It's been like life-changing for me. So I'm happy we're going to talk about this. But the early adopters of this, I think, are going to be the winners. And just like when I remember 1995, were you in high school in 1995? I don't even okay. So I read this Time magazine, which was, for those who don't know, it was a big magazine at the time, had a cover story, and it talked about the internet was going to be the biggest technology of our lifetime. So I read it as a non-techie and going, this totally makes sense to me. Like, I totally believe it. So I started going all in on the internet before I knew what I was doing. And it took me years to figure out how to monetize it. Like before, because we didn't have high-speed internet, I had to go to internet cafes in Toronto to figure out how to do it. Like, it took years. And I think with ChatGPT and AI, we're at the same stage, but it's happening much, much quicker.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And it's the same thing. So back then, so 1995, I mean, I'll probably go to 1998. So I was in my PhD program, neuroscience at Northwestern. And for sure, everybody was buzzing about, at the time, it was Netscape, right? It was the big company at the time. And it was worth so much. And it was really the first time where I saw, a company truly scale, internet scale. And that was really exciting to me, because I was a hard scrabble entrepreneur like you. I'd built a painting company and some other things like that. I saw my dad, who's been a serial entrepreneur, build a number of kind of old school companies, buy low, sell high kind of companies, requiring a lot of humans, low margins. And it was crazy the extent to which these companies were able to truly scale,
right?
And be disruptive. Like that was
right.
I didn't hear the word disruptive tech, but we called it creative destruction back then. So the idea where you could disrupt an entire industry, like the encyclopedias, which went down to zero, right, within 3 years. That was really exciting. So I dove into it at the same time, and I looked really at the whole value chain of it. And one thing I rejected is, at the time, the thing that was really hot was e-commerce. I'm just like, that doesn't seem like the highest and best use. And maybe because it wasn't really used the way that it was a decade later, it really became apparent that software would be better lived on the internet. And maybe it's because I was old software developer and said, wow, like, this is crazy. You can have your software running on the internet and you could continually update it. You don't have to ship, disks to people, which I used to do. I in high school. I had a little software development company.
Yeah.
And like updating people were kind of crazy. And what was really interesting, so I co-founded Eloqua together with Steve Woods and Abe Wagner. You remember them. And what was really interesting about Steve Woods, I'm not sure about Abe, but Steve was actually not a developer in university. We were housemates at Queen's. And he's an engineer, he's engineering physics. He actually did not write code until he got hired as a process engineer at Celestica, and he had to figure out how to control factories in China from here. And the only way that it would make sense, you're not going to be shipping frickin' disks over to China, okay?
Right.
So he had to build things on the internet first because it was just the way that made sense. So one of the things that was interesting about Steve is he kind of lived in that world. So when we built Eloqua, which at the time, this was not fashionable at all, we built it as a cloud service.
Right.
We're one of the few in the world.
That was before Salesforce.com.
No, it was just after Salesforce.
Yeah,
So we founded the company just 4 months after Salesforce.com.
Right.
We were the first company to ever integrate our software with Salesforce.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. We had 6 people in like Steve's bedroom.
Yeah.
That's where the company was. And we had partnered with Salesforce. Salesforce wasn't charging $1 for its software back then.
Right.
It was giving it away for free.
Yeah.
And we were just inspired by the fact that here's another company,
Yeah.
this little company in San Francisco with 40 employees,
Yeah.
this little company that was so believed in the power of the internet as a distribution mechanism for software. I can remember Mark Benioff was a no software guy,
Yeah.
right? That we said, we need to work with these guys because they're cool,
Right.
you know? But I think it shows, so part of that, I think we're lucky. You know, I was lucky that that's the world Steve grew up in. And maybe I was had enough experience because I did software before to see the power of it. Like I had some sense of history, right? Mark Benioff had a sense of history. Like really, people said what he really built was database. What he really wanted to do is build database.com.
Right.
But he needed...
Because he came from Oracle. He
came from Oracle, right? And that's where he got the
databases.
idea.
Yeah.
You know, so... you know, when I think about people that are, you know, amazing potential hires, they are people who are immersed in it, but it's not all they know. You know, they have a sense of history, they have a sense of context, they know other technologies, they know other ways of getting things done, and then they could figure out what is so profound about this and what is going to change, but what's not going to change. I have some ideas on what I don't think is going to change.
Yeah.
And I think if you can answer that question, what is going to be invariant in the next 3 years or 5 years or 10 years that we're always going to need, but what is going to change utterly? I mean, if you can answer that, the world's your oyster.
Well, here's what's exciting about OpenAI and ChatGPT, which is really the first coming to the forefront of this. They're just developing the infrastructure for all of us, and the great application no one's come up with it yet. It's kind of like if you were Steve Jobs and you created the App Store, Instagram hadn't been formed yet, Facebook hadn't been formed yet, TikTok hadn't come yet. So the real money-making applications haven't even been created yet. The only company that's made all the money in AI has actually been NVIDIA. They've literally 80% of all the profits in all of AI, period, went to one company, NVIDIA. Well, that's just like Cisco. When Cisco made all the money in hardware.
Exactly right.
So this is just a relapse of what we saw 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember when Netscape opened their office in Toronto, very tiny little office. I got to meet Mark Andreessen. Tim Clark was there, or Jim Clark. I guess he was the major financing guy. I mean, I've seen all this, and we're seeing the same thing happen. But this, in my opinion, is much, much bigger. So I think today's topic is important because if we are reliving this, but it's much bigger and much faster, who are the dream hires? Let's think about who are the ultimate people to hire right now, because it is a certain type of person I think is going to succeed in this new world. Well, some people will not succeed in this new world. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that,
okay,
maybe take us just a little step back, which is why hire at all, right? Why delegate? Why delegate at all? Why hire at all? Whether it's a full-time hire or whether it's a contractor, you know, why do we do it? And how do we hire good people in general? Like I think once we do that, then we can go and say, okay, well, here's what is special about this AI world. And then we can say, this is how we hire good people in this age of AI. So, you know, let's talk about that.
So
why do we hire?
Can I give an example on this one? Yeah. So I knew as soon as I saw AI, I'm like, this is big. Like I was like beyond excited. And I was the interim for a month, and I decided to record some videos, more promoting my book, but I wanted to record some videos. So record the videos, and I'm like, okay, now I need a video editor. But what already, Mark, I knew, I want a video editor that doesn't do the traditional video editing, because I knew because I'd done 1,000 videos before for 20 years. Traditional video editing is a very long, arduous process. Like it just takes forever. So I was trying to find a video editor that was already using some of these new tools that had just come out. And what I found is, and this has been my experience, it's been 2 years now, when you find a video editor that keeps using the old tools, because that's what they know, it's what they traditionally do, it takes them a long time. And the ones that didn't ever use those old traditional tools and just started with these new, like for example, TikTok created their own editing software. They're faster, they're more efficient. It's so interesting. So what I learned early on, Mark, is when you hire people that haven't come with their old traditional software backgrounds, because they tend to suck you back into that old way of doing things. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it speaks to what I think is the most important principle in hiring, which is you need to understand your own needs. And that sounds like, well, duh, of course we understand we know that we're in pain and we need help. But I think it goes deeper than that. So I think the reason why, and if this was a good hire that you made, it's because you knew enough about video editing to know what it is that you needed. Because video editors come in all different flavors, shapes and sizes. And when I think about the biggest hiring mistakes that I ever made, they were when I thought I knew what I needed.
Right.
I thought I needed, for example, in the CFO, I thought I needed a very operational CFO because I had all these problems in operations. And so I did, and I hired a good one. It just turns out that's not what I needed.
Right.
And the person I hired, I ended up letting him go. He ended up going to another company, and that company did awesome under his leadership in the finance function. And then I hired the person that I rejected, brought him in, and he was a star. So the question is how do you know your own needs? And I think you've got to go pretty deep.
You've got to know what it's probably a task that you're already doing yourself or you know really well before you ever hire for that. Because if I don't know that task and how to do it myself, I don't even know who I'm going to hire or what kind of software I should be even using.
Yeah, like I think the way I do it, and again, I've hired over 1,000 people before, is I do like a 2x2 matrix. So you have to kind of know what is the universe of video editors or CFOs or nannies or chief of staff. So like one of the things that we just talked about before the show is that when I think about some of the best hires I've made, it's when I was insecure, when I actually knew that I didn't know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And so in that case, like for example, I knew that when a kid was on the way, I knew, okay, we needed to bring in a nanny.
Right.
I was working full time at Eloqua, and it needed to be a great hire. And I've heard other people say the most important hire that you'll ever make in business is your childcare.
Yeah,
at
makes
home,
sense. That makes
because
sense.
then your life is a lot better at home.
Yeah.
So I did a really and I felt like this is the best thing I could do as a husband.
Yeah.
And I think I was right. Well, if you like this episode, I would encourage you to hit the like button. Please make some comments. Like we really want to meet some of you guys.
Yeah, listen, we'd love you to subscribe, leave us some comments, and we are planning some pretty fun parties coming up, so maybe we'll invite you. So yeah, please subscribe, give us a comment, and we look forward to meeting you in person as well. Yeah.
The best thing I could do was to make sure that I had the right team at home.
Yes.
So I did an exhaustive study. I interviewed probably over 20 executives. I went on the internet, learned a bunch of stuff, whatever. I had such a deep understanding of like the universe of nannies and like all the different shapes and sizes they come in.
Yeah. And
then I developed my list of criteria. The most important criterion that I decided on was that they treat my child like their own child.
Right.
That was the most important thing. That wasn't written anywhere. That was just something that I'd figured out from just talking to lots of people and understanding what a great person was. And I did end up hiring an A player. And when you hire an A player, and I define an A player as someone who continuously astonishes you to the upside. It's a high bar for me.
Yeah.
When you hire an A player, whether it's an A player nanny at home or it's a CFO or really any position, that is when you take off.
Right.
Like that's when things go absolutely amazing for your business. That's when you can work 10 hours less a week and get more done. And so those are the good hires I made. And it's when I was overconfident and cocky.
Yes.
Where I'm like, oh, I've hired 5 VPs of sales before. I can hire in my sleep. No, it's not the same situation now as it was the last time I hired somebody. It's not the same company. It's not the same business. And so that was a mistake that I had made before. So that's why I think this is important. You come with a list of things. First, you have to understand what is my situation, what is the universe of people, because you can hire an A player, just not for you. It's an A player for another business.
Right. So I think your nanny example is good because you didn't really know anything about being a nanny or raising kids because that was the first child for you. But you did your research, you did your homework, and then you were able to create a criteria, and you did lots of interviews. So today, when I'm hiring people, the first thing I look at are people that are very curious and like to learn. And you can usually figure those people out. They usually do a lot of certifications, do a lot of courses, they love YouTube, they're interested in learning. Because if you don't find someone that's curious and loves to learn, they're not going to succeed in this new AI world where there's a new software tool that's better than the one yesterday, and every day there's a new one.
Curiosity and adaptability, I think, are really at the top of the list now.
So that's huge.
And there are ways to test for that. So what you talked about are, well, these are things that you should look for in their background. One of the things that I look for example, are people who like to tinker with things, especially in a product or development or whatever, position. Like the first developer I hired in my last company, one of the reasons why I hired him was not only did he tinker with software, but he also made his own salami. And I thought that's a weird thing. Because actually, if you get that wrong, you could die.
Right.
You can die of botulism if you get it wrong. So I'm like, that's a weird thing to make your own charcuterie.
Interesting.
But you know what? That really sold me on him because it just gave me, a view into what he did in his spare time. But then I think one of the most important things that I learned about hiring. So for example, you've decided that curiosity, I like adaptability. They're very related.
Yeah.
Are at the top of the list. How do you know that somebody is curious? How do you know if they're adaptable? What kind of questions should you ask them? And what kind of answers would you expect as a result? Yeah. So I learned this is amazing. I just had started Eloqua, and I had spent 1/3 of our entire budget for starting the company on going to a conference in New York called Garage.com. This is
I love that
Guy
conference.
Kawasaki's conference.
Guy Kawasaki.
And I was lucky enough to be sitting next to a guy named Timothy Snellgrove. May he rest in peace. So he was the Timothy behind Timothy's Coffees. So he founded Timothy's Coffees. And he's like, I'm going to give you a golden nugget that if you listen to me and you use this, it will help you for your entire career. And what he told me is, before you make any hire, I want you to make a very simple table, which is what your needs are, what kind of questions you're going to ask, and how you know that this person actually can do that job, right? That can actually do those things. How do you ask one question, the next question, the next question? And to this day, I've done that for every hire that I've done. Well, the hires that are really good, important, I do that. He actually became my first angel investor before my dad became an investor. Wow. And if it wasn't for him, we probably would not have been in Eloqua. I would not have had this career, that I've had. But then that'd be the thing to say. So for example, what kind of question could you ask to know if somebody's really curious?
So I remember my best tech hire was a guy named Chris, and I met him through his girlfriend. So I was at a Christmas event, and she was telling me how amazing her boyfriend was. And he was a bioengineer, had a degree in biochemistry, just really brilliant. But on the side, he's learning all this web programming. And he spends all day, all night doing this, even though it's got nothing to do with biochemistry, what he's from. I'm like, I'd love to meet your boyfriend. And when I met him, I'm like, that's my guy. He has no experience, coding for what I need, but he's my guy. So I think sometimes you meet somebody that's so passionate, so excited about learning new things, you get that sense. So for me, it's people that love to, they could be learning about non-AI things, but they're passionate about it. They're hardworking. So for me, it's about finding people that have a tremendous desire and interest in something else.
So then, for example, you could ask a candidate, what other things are you interested in these days? What technologies do you think are interesting?
Right.
What are two disruptive technologies that you think are really synergistic if they come together? There's a bunch of, so what I would do then before hiring anybody is in advance, you have a list of things, right? That ironically you've had an AI create for you, right? But which are characteristics that you want. What I would do is say, okay, if adaptability is so important, I'm going to ask a question tell me about a time when you had to make an abrupt change, a 180-degree change from what you thought you had to do. Why did you do it, right? Take me through that. People who are great candidates, not only can they answer that question, you can double click on it again and again and again, and they will go as deep as you want to go.
Yeah.
People who are not great hires on that particular characteristic can only go one level deep, but they can't keep going. They can't tell you all the twists and turns that they've made and why they made it, because chances are someone made that decision for them. They're actually not necessarily adaptable. There's someone else that is adaptable that says, oh, you should go and change now, as opposed to them actually doing it.
So a couple of things. One is my list was, what I did is I studied my best hires, I've ever made my whole life. And I made a list of what were the criteria, what I found were like, what were the commonalities. And I did use OpenAI and ChatGPT 4.0 to help me refine it. So I use AI for everything, even when I message my kids. And then sometimes my daughter will say, Dad, did you use ChatGPT? I'm like, yeah, here's my original message, Kate. And then here's ChatGPT. And then like they see, oh, this one's way better. Cool. So I actually use it for everything. But your point on the second one was the personality of the person. So I look for curious people who love to learn. But I'm thinking about Chris Angler, my best tech hire. He was a very positive, optimistic thinker. And even though I give him a challenge, he wouldn't go, oh, I can't do that. I've never been trained. He wouldn't make excuses. He'd go, I think I could figure this out. So optimistic people think very differently than pessimistic people. So very early on, I learned you can only hire optimistic people because they always think about how can I do it versus, oh, I can't do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, my best hires too, we just call them great athletes, right? They've got a great set of characteristics. That should also tie to your company values or your personal values. If you're hiring someone to help you with personal things, like it's still part of your team. One thing I had probably my first VC board member told me, and it really stuck with me on this, which is whenever you're feeling frustrated, angry, annoyed, depressed, any negative emotion, the solution is often team. And it really is true. And that actually stuck with me in terms of why I invested so much in hiring a good nanny, because he had just invested in my company and he told me this, and it really rung true for me. Whether it's business or pleasure or your personal life. So you're in business and you're finding, man, this is hard. This is hard to get new sales. This is hard to retain customers. Why is this so hard? Well, you probably don't have the right team around you.
Right.
And you've got to bring on the right person. And then all of a sudden things go a lot better. And so in my experience, again, a lot of, I think people make hiring mistakes. They really go for, well, did they do all aspects of this job before? Like they look at the resume, and for sure, like you don't want to hire somebody who's completely out of left field. But I've also learned from my experience, if there's not a gap there that they're excited about filling, they're probably not a good hire either. So you actually don't want someone who can do the job in their sleep, because then they might sleepwalk through the job and not give 100%. I think you want somebody who, can do the aspects of the job, but there's a gap there that they don't know how to do, that they do have holy shit moments, on the job. And then I think those can be truly transformational hires. And the best ones I made are like that.
My best hires have been people that didn't have the experience for the job that I hired them for. Again, they had some great attributes, but they didn't necessarily have the experience. What I find out about experience, let's say, this person's worked for this company for 10 years, been doing this role for 10 years. What they've really had, Mark, is they've had 1 year of experience 10 times over. And what I'm looking for is somebody that has some great skills, but I'm much more interested in how hardworking they are, their attitude, how curious they are they willing to learn things. To me, I'll bet on that person versus the person that's had 10 years experience, again, doing that one job 10 times in a row. What's your experience on that?
Well, actually, as you say that, I think about my first 2 executive hires at Influitive. Both of them were not VPs before. And I had to convince them to take the job because they actually weren't sure they could do it.
Right.
So Jim Williams, my head of marketing, who you may remember from Eloqua, he was there as well, but in a much more junior capacity. He had done almost every aspect of marketing, PR, demand gen, product marketing. He had done that. He never run the whole show. And I said, I think you're ready. I think you could do it. He's like, I don't know. I said, I think I actually had to convince him to take the job. Same with Julie Prasovsky, who became my first head of CS. Same thing. She had been a team lead. She'd done a number of aspects of CS. She'd not run the whole thing, really been a leader. I've hired people before and put them in completely new jobs. So I hired someone who'd never done BD before. He was a great VP of marketing. I already had a VP of marketing. But I think for him, it was really exciting for him to come on board because I really had to show him. I said, I believe in you, because I saw he was great.
Right.
He was actually one of my first customers at Influitive, and he just managed the shit out of us and did a great job. And that's one of the things that I would encourage everyone in the audience to do is always have your eyes and ears open. There are great people everywhere.
Yes.
Including, in this case, this was my customer, and I could see this is a kick-ass person.
Yes.
And I went and said, I think you're going to be my great first head of business development. He's like, I've never done business development. I'm like, well, you've done marketing. Like BD is a form of marketing.
Yeah.
It's just marketing, but like to partners.
Yeah.
And he came on board. We got him a mentor for BD so he could learn the craft.
Yeah.
But he ended up being a kick-ass head of BD.
Yeah.
But I think part of it was he was so excited
Right.
to grow and develop his career in the right way. And I really think this is an important principle really for everything.
You're right.
I want to bring on people who are excited to come to work.
Yes.
Again, even if they're a contractor. Okay, like contractors have choices of where they can work. And they want career development and growth just like anybody.
Yeah.
So I want to bring on someone absolutely who's a good athlete, who's got all those attributes that you want. But they're going to give 110% because they feel like every step that they take with you is a step in the right direction in their career. They're not just there for a paycheck.
You're 100%. So I think about Chris Engler, back to my best tech hire. And then the business is growing really fast. Like we're going it's going crazy. We're working like till midnight every night. He's like, Roman, I got to hire like another tech guy. I'm like, okay, like should we hire? So we had all these resumes, all these interviews. He's like, I want to hire this guy, Craig Morrison. I'm like, okay, bring him in. So Craig had hair basically to his ass.
I don't know those guys.
Yeah, his only real job in his resume was 10 years. He was running a bar called Lee's Palace. He was like the general manager. And I'm like, okay, you've never done software development, but that was his passion. But Chris Engler was so excited about Craig Morrison. I'm like, Craig, I know you've been running a bar for 10 years and you book bands all over. I get it. But like we start here like 8 in the morning. And he's like looking at me because he would start his day like 4 in the afternoon. I'm like, if you think you could be here at 8 in the morning and we could do this. And he did. And he, again, another superstar. But it's sometimes the superstars bring on other unlikely superstars, and they were an incredible team, unbelievable. But again, if I hired an IT recruiter, Craig Morrison wouldn't have gotten into our company. So it's amazing sometimes, and my best hires been through my employees, and they hire somebody else. One I remember was, hey, who do you know? It's like, oh, I know, but her only job, she's just been a waitress. I'm like, okay, let's meet her. But her personality, she was amazing. She wanted to learn, and her only experience was being a waitress before. Yeah. So some of the best people, they don't have the best resumes, but these are extraordinary people, and you learn that.
Yeah, and so I think the method I talked about is a way to uncover that, right? So there are some characteristics of people who are what I just call great athletes, but you don't have to guess. There are questions that you can ask in an interview. And the other thing that I would also emphasize is that interviews are actually not a great way to hire people. I think it's not a bad way to screen people.
Right.
So I think we can use interviews to weed out, and I try to weed out a third to a half of people in screening interviews. But I mean, I learned this the hard way when I was painting houses. Interviews are not a good way to hire painters or anyone else. The way to hire a great painter is to watch them paint.
Right.
And I think the same is true if you're hiring an assistant, a CFO, a head of marketing, a developer, or anything else. You want to try to simulate the job as much as possible. So if AI, for example, is important, then we should use AI in the hiring process, and you should allow the person to use AI in their responses. So we would always have someone do like a presentation. They could go and interview anyone they wanted in our company, even outside the company. They'd sometimes even talk to customers and whatnot. And they would come back with a presentation, which is like, this is what I would do if I was here.
Right.
And then we would have a bunch of people that would go to sort of ask them questions.
That's awesome. I like that.
Yeah, no, I learned this the hard way by watching people paint. Because first I hired all the wrong people, and then I started to go to other job sites. I had my stopwatch. I'd watch people paint. I'm like, that's my person, and I would offer 50% more, whatever it is they're making.
Right.
And I would bring them on to be on my side, and I continued to do that, when I was in a company. So you want to simulate the job, and I think you want to, let them cheat with AI. The same way they let people cheat with calculators these days.
Absolutely. Or Google.
All right, Roman, let's get into what is for this age of AI, specifically for AI, as specific as you can, because I mean, my point of view is that I think AI is really, it's an important tech, it's just another tech, but there are some things that are special about it. So of all the characteristics that you think are really important in this age, what do you have as your number one?
My number one would be someone that has great daily habits, because great daily habits means they have discipline. With great daily habits and discipline, you can learn anything. You know what time to get up in the morning, when you're able to learn, when you're able to train, whether it's new software or your body. But I would argue that great daily habits, and it's also, and my experience has been some of my most successful clients only hired athletes or former athletes, because these are people that already had been indoctrinated in great daily habits and getting up early and working out, and they knew how to work as a team. So I've seen this in the real life of great successful businesses. When you hire people that were former athletes, they've already got the skill set.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I've seen that before, particularly team athletes.
Right.
I've seen that.
Correct.
So there's a difference, for example, between a great tennis player, and they can still be fantastic, to somebody who was, captain of their soccer team or whatnot. So, yeah, no, I think you're right about that. And I like the way that you linked the daily habits, like the discipline, to being adaptable, because you're right. If you're not wasting time on stupid things and you actually incorporate, learning into those daily habits, and I buy into that now. So,
and I think people, Mark, that understand time management. So a lot of people could be great, really smart, but if they can't manage their own time, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And sometimes teaching time management, yes, we can do that, but wouldn't it be great to hire people who have great time management skills? I just think that's a good one.
So I don't buy into that as much.
Okay.
And the reason is I've just hired amazing people that are not fantastic time managers, but it really does depend on the job, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking about, for example, like a brilliant product manager that I hired before, that with poor time management, but just a brilliant visionary and was able to see around corners, and that was his job. That said, once we got to 80 people, he wasn't a fit anymore. We needed someone who's going to work inside of our environment and be reliable, and the brilliant out of the box innovations became less important. So no, I buy into that.
Let's talk about another one. So even if I found someone that was very curious, loved learning new technologies, loved learning new things, was very optimistic, was very positive, maybe had great daily habits, there's another point that I would want. I would want them to have a great personality and be fun to be around. Because if I'm going to be working with this person 40, 50, 60 hours a week, I want somebody fun, somebody I want to hang out with. Generally speaking, optimistic people might have that criteria. But if you find people that aren't fun, you don't want to socialize with, it's just not fun. I don't think you can build that culture, that team, without having some fun people that you'd want to hang out with, somebody you want to go have a beer with.
Yeah, at Bain, we used to call that the Pittsburgh Airport test, which is like if you're stuck with this person for 6 hours in the Pittsburgh Airport, which it's actually not that bad, because I've been to the Pittsburgh Airport. It's actually not as terrible as I thought it would be, given that there's a whole test about this.
Yeah.
But if you're stuck with a person for 6 hours, are you excited about that, or are you really dreading that? And I've seen that. I mean, you mentioned the long-haired software developer. Like, I have seen, particularly in software development, where you think, right, in software engineering, that collegiality and fun and teamwork is less important. People are there coding, and you think as long as they code. And so I actually had a brilliant technologist who happened to have really long hair. And I mean, he was amazing. Like, you could ask him any question and he'd solve it like that, but not really much of a team player, definitely moody. And ultimately that brings the team down and wasn't a great hire.
And I think when you have people that are fun and sociable, like I think about our best times as a company, our team would work till midnight because they'd socialize together. And my team was very hard to recruit from me, even when you offered them way more money, because they want to leave their friends. So that social bond became very powerful. And today the problem with remote work is there's no social bond. So it's very easy to hire a remote person. You offer them $5,000, $10,000 more, they're gone. And you can't do that when they're friends, when there's a strong social.
I know there's a big trend towards remote companies. And when it's time for me to build another software company again, I'm going to go against the grain. Like, I believe in offices.
Yeah, I agree. Me too.
And now you can't find all the talent you need in Toronto. And I've always been very open to hiring elsewhere, but I have clusters. I have a cluster in Boston. I have a cluster in San Francisco, Austin, Texas. When it was time to expand here, I built a little office in Halifax. Why? Because they have tons of universities, and the people who graduate, they'd like to stay there if they can. So you can hire great people for 30% less. But I had them all in an office, and it's a lot more synergistic. Yeah, I've not figured out, like, the work, people really love the opportunity to work from home.
Yeah.
And so I think that might be a future episode. Like, how do you get that right balance of people, socializing and building those bonds in an office, but also being able to, get more stuff done.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think humans were designed to be together, and we work better together. And an office takes away all the distractions. I think working at home, it's so difficult for all of us, even if you're highly motivated. So no, I agree with you.
So do you want to know what I think is the most important thing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I think the most important thing today, and even more important in the age of AI than it was in the age of the mobile internet, the World Wide Web, and all of the technologies that came before, is great business judgment. Because, now you can get an AI to spit out a whole bunch of words that sound really good. And it's really only 50 to 80% good, or maybe less than 50 in some cases. I mean, I've been amazed at the number of times where, GPT or its equivalent will spit out something that's super confident and authoritative and like, this is the answer, and it's bloody wrong. And then you got to ask another question.
You've got to multiple questions. Yes.
And so, or you just have to have someone who really understands the strategy that you're trying to execute. Okay, so strategy, it's a military word, right? The idea is how are we going to accomplish our objective? Under what, are we going to go up that hill? Are we going to go around here? And why, right? How does our approach map our strengths, right? And blunt our weaknesses? So you need someone who understands that. And that, requires some brains. And one of the things that I've seen as technologies have improved is that the requirements for, intelligence, both like IQ and EQ, really go up. So I can see a day, for example, when an executive assistant, which, today might make $70,000 a year. It wasn't long ago where that was $40,000 a year. That person is making $120K a year. Why? Because they're super productive. Why are they super productive? Because they use technologies in the right way. They have discernment, right? They're able to say, well, this doesn't sound right. Oh, I'm going to go and train a custom GPT, and I'm going to make it smarter, and I'm going to use that as part of a learning loop. Now that is a real superstar. Yeah. And those are not that easy to find.
You're right. I agree with that.
And so you can, again, if business judgment, understanding strategy is important, there are questions you can ask around that. So I would take a step back and say, how would I know this is a good person? What kinds of things would they say? How would they answer it? How would they do this assignment? So I would have them use the technology in a way, and let's see if they have that discernment, or do they just copy and paste?
Right. No, for sure. I agree with you. I do have a couple controversial ones I've come up with, and I ran this by an IT recruiter yesterday, and she said, you can't say this stuff. But Mark, I'm going to say it anyway. So two of the companies that I worked with as a co-founder, early guy first guy on the executive team, went to over $1 billion in less than a year. And that doesn't happen every day in a company, but it happened in these two cases. And I started studying what did they do differently in terms of the team they put together. Both of them is Lou Pearlman from the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC in Orlando, Florida. And this is Chip Conk, and this was Montecito Property Company in Florida. We set it up.
It's probably Eloqua too, if you think about it.
Eloqua too, but these two. This example is a little different.
Yeah, okay.
They hired the best people they could, but they were all from different cities and even different countries.
That is different. Okay.
So what happened was when we went into the environment, we had no friends, no family in that city. So guess what we did? We just worked. We had no distractions, no birthday parties to go to, no family events to go to. We had nothing else to do. And I remember talking to Chip Conk about this because he had replicated this. He's been very successful. And he's like, every new company, he goes to a new city, brings everybody in. And he's like, Roman, he goes, people, like we own them because we're their life, we're their social life, we're everything. And he was right. So there's, again, if not everyone wants to build $1 billion startup, but if you do, something to think about, they don't all have to be from your city. Sometimes bringing people into your city and where they have no friends, no family, it's very powerful.
Right. Well, I think the lesson I took, so in the case of Eloqua, they were not from different places. Most of them were from Queen's University, which is where I went to school.
Right.
And I think the common denominator between your story and mine is that we just had to succeed. It was do or die. They were
young, no kids as well.
Absolutely. They were young and no kids. No, so absolutely. We had to succeed. We had nothing else to lose.
Yes.
You're right. I mean, somebody with children would probably have left the company.
Right.
Because you're running out of cash.
Yes.
The CEO, who's me, didn't know what the hell he was doing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I could totally see where, people who have more to lose
right.
are going to go and find somewhere else to go.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in our case, just had to do it. And they were going to grow so much as individuals going through this, time. So no, I do think that's a great principle, that you set things up where people have to succeed or else they die.
Right. Burn the bridges.
Yeah. I mean, this really became, I keep relearning things. So when I was at Influitive, I basically acqui-hired a team of a social gaming team. It's a whole long story. I was on the board of this company. It was going to fail. They were going to scatter to the four ends of the earth. I said, hey, why don't you come here instead? So I had all these people from Pakistan and Singapore, and they came to Toronto. It's a crazy story. And so I had these gamers inside of my company, and they were really helping. They were starting to transform it, but it was limited in terms of what they could do. So the ex-CEO of this company came to me and said, Mark, this company sucks. So we can't take it anymore here. It's too bureaucratic. We had like 40 people. He's like, I want to go build something new. It's like, I want to go and bring on a couple of people, one of my people and maybe someone else. I want to go to San Francisco and I want to build something awesome. And me saying, all right, fine. You're on. So the only mission you have is you need to build something like 10 times better, faster than kind of what we've done here.
Hi, it's Roman Bodnarchuk from the Best Half Show. Today is all about 10xing your life, 10xing your health, 10xing your business, 10xing your income. Our entire show is about making the second half of your life 10 times better than your first. But today we want you to 10x your algorithms. By you pressing subscribe right now on the Best Half Show, all of a sudden, the feed that you get from Apple, from YouTube, from Spotify will change. You're going to get content like ours, content that will help you 10x your life. So press subscribe now and 10x your life.
And so they started to do that, and it was very controversial. Like, people in the company were like, what the fuck is this? Like, why are we spending money on these yahoos out in San Francisco doing whatever?
Right.
So it was controversial. There's a lot of pressure on me from my team and from the board to go and shut it down. And so they had to execute every quarter, and they did. I mean, not only did they build an incredible product, which you can see today on the web, it's called Upshot Stories, and it's an unbelievable case study generating product, awesome product, but they innovated in all these other ways where our core company was being stodgy. So they were the first to adopt Slack. They were the first to adopt a number of, if they were around today, they'd be adopting all these AI tools ahead of everyone else. And so at the parent company, we're just like, we got to be impressed. Like, they're running rings around us over there. And we had to go run faster too. But I think one of the big reasons why it worked was, first of all, I did bring on a great athlete, who has all the characteristics you've mentioned to go and run the thing. I think I gave him the right mission. But more importantly, if he didn't execute, that team was gone.
Right.
Necessity is the mother of invention. So I think we can set things up, such that if we're not seeing the right data coming out, we're going to try something new.
So here's the advantage, I think, Mark, to this whole remote work idea. More people are willing to actually relocate now than ever before. So even if I wanted to build an office, let's say in Toronto, but I want to recruit superstars from different cities, I actually think it's easier for me to recruit people to come to Toronto now, work in my office than ever before, because people are more open to moving. So I think I think we can use this remote work even in an office environment and use that as an advantage. But we definitely live in a time where if you can hire somebody that's young, my best people have been in their 20s and 30s. I know you've had some different experiences, but when they're young and before they have kids, they can really dedicate everything into their company. And that's what I found. Those have been my best hires.
Yeah, no, for sure. And some people would agree with you. Like, I think Elon Musk has said some similar things. I think Mark Zuckerberg earlier in his career said similar things. No, and there's a lot of advantages to, again, take a step back. Why does that work, right? And I think it works because you have people who are, they're more adaptable because they're young. They are still building their career, so they really value the experience that they get. And don't have some bad habits. But I've also had some great people. So my ex-chairman of the board, over 70 years old, and was the first to use AI, was one of the first people to get into cryptocurrency. I mean, was one of the first people to go to China, teach in China. So this guy is consistently ahead of the curve. It's one of the reasons why I hired him to be my chairman.
Yeah.
So even though he was a much older guy, he was very much young at heart. And I think that's what we want to look for.
But you agree that's an outlier. That's not a typical.
No, it's not a typical person,
yeah.
but again, it depends on what you want. If you want a CFO for your company, you probably don't want a 25-year-old CFO.
Fair enough.
I mean,
Depends on the position. You're right.
You probably want somebody who's a great leader of people, who's got strong EQ.
Yeah.
So I mean, one of the things that so it's interesting. There's an article I read, really changed my life. It was in Harvard Business Review, and it was the optimal age for a number of different jobs.
Oh, okay, that's
positions.
interesting. Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
So for a tennis player, guess what that age is?
21.
Yeah, 22, something like that.
Yeah.
VP of marketing, guess what that is?
30.
36.
Yeah.
Okay. And so chess champions, 29. I mean, there's a bunch of things like that. So, and one of the things that was very interesting for me, and one of the reasons why I became a CEO coach, was the optimal age to be an executive coach is 56.
Yes.
So it's quite a bit older.
Because you had some experience.
Well, it's because one of the things that does get better as you age, one of the few things, I know, because I have all kinds of aches and pains today, so a lot of things don't get better, but your wisdom about people really gets a lot better.
Right.
So, I thought, well, the best job I can think of when I'm 60 is to be a CEO coach. I think that's an awesome gig. Do I want to be a noob CEO coach when I'm 60? I'm like, no. Right. I want to have my 10,000 hours. So that's actually why I started coaching. When I stepped down from Influitive to homeschool my son, I started dabbling in it, not because I really wanted to coach that much, but I felt like I wanted to get some experience in it.
Yeah.
So like there is an optimal age for
that
things.
Makes sense.
It's kind of
that makes a lot of sense. And when we talked about moving, I started thinking about Elon. I think about what he's done. So they're closing the Twitter headquarters in San Francisco. He's moving everyone to Austin. Think about SpaceX. He's moved everyone from California. I mean, there's a great example of super successful companies where they're doing that. And I think what you're going to find is the people that don't move, they're probably not like the poor, smart, young, hungry people you really want in your company. Yeah. But the younger people, maybe with no kids, are probably the ones that are going to be moving. So I think there's something to be said about the optimal age.
Yeah, for sure. No, and in many cases younger, but depends on the job, right? If you
depends on the job.
But I do think that just going back to our AI environment, this will impact not just the frontline people, right? It impacts everyone. So if you're hiring a VP that is going to have, whatever it is, a department of 30 or 40 people under their command, AI dramatically impacts their world too, right? So I do think that this premium on adaptability, on curiosity, that you've seen them working in it, that they have good business judgment, that they have a great personality. I think those things are true no matter who you're hiring.
So in wrapping up, I believe that if you want to 10x your success, 10x your life, you've got to integrate AI in every possible part of your life, whether it's working out or health, nutrition, business. There's so many AI tools that are just mind-boggling how they can help us. And if you want to 10x your business, get your employees and get your team to really embrace all the AI tech out there, because it's the only way to really become superhuman.
Yeah, so I put a finer point on that, which is develop a theory for yourself in terms of where AI is going to be transformative and where it's not, right? So what do you need to be great at doing? Where should you focus all of your attention? Because even in a place, because the thing is AI is evolving too. It's a moving target. It's going to get better at some things. The same way that we could have predicted even back in 2000 at the maybe the toddler age of the World Wide Web, you could see the shape of it. You could see where it was just going to get
Yeah.
10x better every 2 or 3 years.
Yes, yes.
And you could kind of bet on that. But then there were some things
They just-
that were
yeah.
never going to change. And there are some things that are going to get worse.
Right.
Right? So that's also really interesting. That are going to get worse. So we're going to get crapification, which is a real word, right?
Yeah.
Which is where you're going to get all the spurious junk and you're going to get more and more and more and more junk, right? So this ability to find kind of the gold nugget in a heap of shit, right?
Yeah.
Is going to become a really valuable skill. And it was. And you can go and bet on that. Bet on the fact that you're going to. So I think that's what I would do is like play with the technology, play with AI, understand its shape, and then you can have a theory of victory. Here's how I'm going to win in my personal life. Here's how I'm going to win in my business. I see where AI and other disruptive tech, I see where it's going. I'm going to see a time where the cost of whatever X is, customer support. I see a day where the cost of customer support trends towards zero.
Right.
And that will probably happen.
Yeah.
Right? What kind of person do I need in support? What does that world look like?
Right.
And how do I bring that person on? How do I find that person? How do I bring that person on? Because that's the way to win. The way to win is to understand how this tech is best used and where do we put the human chess pieces and the AI chess pieces and how do they best fit together?
No, that's great advice. So in wrapping up our session, we're going to do something new, Mark. We're going to have a studio audience and we're going to invite people that are subscribers of ours to be part of our show every week. So for those of you that like to join us, we'd love to meet you. If you hit subscribe on whatever platform you're on, we're going to be picking a handful of people every week, and you're going to join us live for our weekly show. Have a great day, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Best Half Show.